in the discussion. DOJ has an update as to their correspondence to assist him to get on.
Hello, Chair Moore. This is Noel. We are trying different avenues to go ahead and try to contact Dr. Brown and assist him via text, email, and phone. We're going to continue doing so just to make sure that yes, he can get in.
Chair Moore.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
This is Cheryl Grills. In the service of time, and given that we have a quorum, might we go ahead and proceed?
Yeah, sure. We can proceed, but I'm just putting it on the record that Dr. Brown would like to be a part of the conversation for this agenda item and the other agenda items. So we need to make sure that he's included in this conversation. We need to do everything that we need to do to make sure he's included in the conversation.
Right. Yes, I do understand, and I think they are trying, but at this point, we don't have any idea how long that's going to take.
Okay, Member Gross, you can begin with your update.
Okay, so this is just, and I'm going to make this very brief again in the service of time. This is a brief update on where we are at with the listening sessions in terms of planning and activities. So we have now a sense of the calendar of listening sessions. Of course, one already was held in January. There's another listening session that's actually happening this week. And there will be listening sessions that are slated for April, May, June, and July. Some of the anchor organizations, in fact, will be holding multiple listening sessions rather than just a single session. What are the listening sessions going to be focused on? They're going to provide some basic information to all participants about reparations without taking a particular side or perspective about the definition of reparations or any aspects of reparations. And then the participants will be invited to share their thoughts on what forms reparations should take, who should be eligible, and also identifying the harms that have occurred with an emphasis on participants being able to share.
Member Grill, hear me?
Uh-huh.
Over, I'm on the phone with Dr. Really missed the beginning of your presentation. Could you start over, please?
I couldn't understand you. You were breaking up. I'm sorry. You're on mute. I can't hear you.
As you were beginning your presentation, Dr. Brown called me again, trying to get on the line. So I did not hear the beginning of your update. Can you please start over? Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so this is just a quick synopsis of where things are at with the listening sessions. We now have a working calendar of when the reparation listening sessions will occur. Of course, one already happened in January. There's a listening session that's actually happening this week. And listening sessions are slated for April, May, June, and July. And I noted that some anchor organizations are actually holding multiple listening sessions, not just a single session. What will the listening sessions address? It will include educating participants about reparations, just the basics, without taking a position on or perspective on what reparations, how they should be defined, or other aspects of reparations. The listening sessions will also then look at and encourage participants to share what forms of reparations they would recommend, who should be eligible, and the harms that have occurred as a result of the period of enslavement to the present, with an emphasis on participants being able to share their personal and family stories of various forms of harm. The populations that are being targeted to participate in the listening sessions, some are just for broad, unspecified community audience. Some are targeting those typically overlooked, including foster youth, the unhoused, and formerly incarcerated. Some are looking at nonprofit leaders. Some are inviting Black student groups, housing advocates, youth age 16 and older, and elders 50 and older. And the listening sessions are covering a variety of regions of the state. The Reparations Task Force members are being and will be encouraged to sit in on the listening sessions while adhering to Bagley-Keene Act. And we will be sending, or Bunch Center actually, will be sending a list of the listening sessions once it's complete. And also as they become known, because some people are still in the planning stages. Finally, I want to mention that Professor Stoll and I are continuing to look for additional funding to make sure that all of the resources needed for the listening sessions are available. And so I'm happy to report that a California foundation awarded us $300,000 that will go to Bunch to support the communications firms and the work of the listening sessions. And I submitted another grant to another foundation on the East Coast. And I expect to be speaking with the program officer about that proposal, if not by the end of this month, the beginning of April. So that's just a quick update. But again, the important piece here is that the scheduling is happening. The communications firms are working with the anchor organizations, as well as the facilitator and the convener of the anchor orgs. And, we are continuing to round out funding, and we want the Reparations Task Force members to be involved, and you will be receiving information so that it can be organized in a fashion that the participation doesn't violate Bagley-Keene. That's my update.
Are there any comments or questions from other task force members related to this update? I can see everyone on the screen, so if you have a comment or question or concern, you can you can just say it. You can speak. Okay, so I do have a couple of concerns about the community engagement plan as it's been laid out or developed. And so I'll just state them now and, ask for an explanation from Member Grills. And then also, and we can talk about this tomorrow, see about agendizing this conversation around community engagement for the April hearing. So essentially, there's a few concerns that I have. Okay, for one, right, it is the public participants, in my own understanding as well, that the task force selected anchor organizations, which comprises of 7 organizations, should be organizing listening sessions and not the 2 communication firms, right? So to my understanding, that the 2 communications firms advertised an urgent advisory meeting on Wednesday, March 23rd, 2022, those communication firms being AB Partners, led by Andre Banks, and Young Communications, led by Gwendolyn Young, right? That meeting that they held as an urgent advisory meeting on Wednesday, March 23rd, was clearly outside of their scope of work, right? The two communication firms were recruited to educate the California public generally about the task force and what we have planned, right? But instead, what happened is that these two communication firms sent a Google form invite to select groups, which included a question about eligibility. And to my understanding, the two communication firms did not invite the anchor organizations to the meeting, which are the organizations that are actually supposed to organize meetings of this kind. In addition, the two communication firms advertised the meeting to be an hour long, but the meeting instead ended up being 15 minutes. And once the meeting started, the participants list and the chat function were disabled. They also gave members of the public who attended the meeting wrong information about the task force. For instance, someone asked for the Reparations Task Force website, and then Gwendolyn Young from Young Communications gave out the wrong email. She didn't even provide the website. She gave out an email, and it was the wrong email. So those are some of the concerns I have about the two communication firms. But then I also have some concerns about the Bunch Center. The Bunch Center, and I looked and analyzed and read through the contract between the DOJ and the Bunch Center. The Bunch Center has missed several deadlines for at least two deliverables explicitly stated in the contract, one being logistical support for listening sessions, and then also the creation of the website. Logistical support for the listening sessions was supposed to be communicated to the anchor organizations by January 31st, and the website for the listening sessions was supposed to be created last month on February 28th. Also, the Bunch Center has failed to meet with anchor organizations twice a month, as stated in the contract, and has failed to inform anchor organizations of their duty to provide them with logistical support, like recording equipment and technicians and location costs. In fact, some anchor orgs have reached out to me stating that they believe that they had to use their stipend for these recording equipment, technician, and other logistical support costs, although the contract clearly states that the Bunch Center is supposed to be providing logistical support to these anchor orgs. So in summary, I'm putting on record my concerns, not only with the Bunch Center, but with the two communication firms that were also recruited by eMember Grills. The two communication firms clearly hosted a meeting outside of their scope of work. They have not promoted or created any graphics for the hearings. In fact, I reached out to them via email asking if promotional graphics were a part of their deliverables, and they didn't respond, which then I had to create the flyers for myself. I had to create the flyers on my own to send out to social media. We have given the Bunch Center and these two communication firms upwards to $1 million to do a job, and they're not doing it by virtue of what has been stated in the contract. This is a serious concern, and that is why I know we don't have enough time because the agenda for this particular item is only set for 5 minutes, but these concerns have to be addressed sooner rather than later. I will be talking about this more tomorrow to entertain a motion to get a comprehensive conversation about this at our next meeting, and then also to see about opening up the process again. I think this is what Dr. Brown was pointing to at the beginning of this process, where he was calling for transparency. We may have to open up the process again to allow other folks the opportunity, other communication firms, other people like the Bunch Center, to come in and to give an open and public presentation to the public about what they can do and what deliverables they can bring to this process. So we'll talk about that more in detail tomorrow, but I just wanted to make those concerns.
Yes, thank you for that, Chair Moore. And I have to respond. I wish that you had taken an opportunity to give me some heads up about some of your concerns. I'm hearing this for the first time. And had you gotten in touch with me in advance, then we could have, or I could have done some of the work to have answers ready for you about these, but you did not. I will say, though, that communications firms, based on our discussion in our last meeting, have already been given notice that they are going to present at our April meeting. But in the meantime, I will speak with Bunch Center and with the communications firms about your concerns so that there's an informed response to the things that you have raised. I will note that I know the Bunch Center has had a number of challenges related to things above and beyond the control of the Bunch Center that have to do with the bureaucracy of the University of California systems and state of California regulations. And that has slowed things dramatically. And that is above and beyond their control. That's University of California rules and regulations and state of California policies. But again, I will definitely follow up with your concerns with both the Bunch Center and with both of the communications firms.
Girls, I truly appreciate it. Is Dr. Brown on the call yet? Okay, great. Yeah, my only concern is that this community engagement plan, you know, whether it's the Bunch Center and the two communication firms more specifically should be the communication arm for the entire task force and not for one particular task force member. So,
oh, excuse me, what do you mean by that, Chair Moore?
I know at the last meeting you stated that you wished for there to be more community engagement, listening sessions on the question of the community of eligibility, and then the two communication firms, organize an urgent advisory meeting on the community of eligibility.
Please,
and they're
those two things.
not supposed
Please
to be
not put things together. They have nothing to do with one another. What I said in the last task force meeting, please, has nothing to do. I was as surprised to see that urgent session coming to light. That had nothing to do with anything that I said and has nothing to do with them responding to me. So let's just make sure we have our facts straight, okay?
Okay, thank you for clarifying. So we will move on. Thank you again, Member Grills, for your update. So we will move to the next item on the agenda, which is information, discussion, and potential action items, Department of Justice updates.
All right. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the task force. I have just a few updates to provide this morning for your information and potential action item. First, during the February meeting, there was a request for DOJ to circulate a doodle poll gauging the availability of the task force members for a May meeting in the event that there was a desire for the task force to convene. The schedule of future meetings that Chair Moore and Member Lewis presented for your consideration, which was approved by the task force, did not include a May meeting. The next meeting after the April meeting is to take place currently in July after publication of the task force report on June 1. Notwithstanding this decision, if there is business that the task force feels must be taken up at a May meeting, we want to provide the opportunity for you to share with the task force so that DOJ can either turn its focus to planning a May meeting or continue in our efforts to obtain a quorum and location for an in-person meeting in July. Are there any questions or comments on that point? Okay. Moving on to the April meeting. As you all know, the next meeting of the task force is approximately 2 weeks away, April 13th through the 14th. In keeping with the public notice requirements under Bagley-Keene, the agenda must be posted by this Friday, April the 1st. The task force voted in the February meeting to spend one day of the April meeting receiving testimony on various issues related to education. And that means that we must expeditiously confirm these witnesses. I would appreciate if you would forward the names to us no later than the close of business on Monday, April the 4th. Due to the sunset on Governor Newsom's executive order suspending the in-person meeting requirements under Bagley-Keene, all witnesses must appear in person for the April meeting, which will be held at the Third Baptist Church in San Francisco. Task force members who will be unable to travel to San Francisco for next month's meeting, but who wish to appear telephonically must notify DOJ by noon this Friday, April the 1st, as we will need to post the location from where you will be appearing telephonically, which must be physically accessible to the public. The next item that I would like to raise with you is to seek direction from the task force on how it would like to see witnesses confirmed for future meeting. In preparing for the March meeting, DOJ staff was presented with a unique circumstance whereby the task force members provided a large number of potential witnesses. A large number of those individuals confirmed their interest and availability, more than could be accommodated by the time that the task force had allotted for a particular topic. The decision of which witnesses are selected to provide testimony or to expand or limit the amount of time determined by the task force for each topic falls outside of DOJ's role to provide administrative, legal, and technical support to the task force. Therefore, we're looking for you to institute a system by which the task force will decide which witnesses are confirmed for any given panel, particularly when the number of confirmed witnesses exceeds the time for that topic. And in setting out this system, we recommend that objective bases be utilized to decide which witnesses are included and which are not. And we can work with you to prioritize witnesses who are not included for future meetings. Do any task force members have any thoughts or ideas on this particular point before I move to the next?
Can I, this is Lisa Holder. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I am having some technical difficulties, so I'm not sure whether I can be seen or heard. I do have a comment and a reflection regarding this item. Now, my understanding was that at our last meeting, we were very specific that we wanted only a few witnesses to address some very specific concerns about the issue of eligibility. At our last meeting, we indicated that we wanted witnesses to come in and talk to us about issues regarding genealogy, etc. And we specifically said that we wanted no more than 1 hour witnesses because we wanted to spend a significant amount of time discussing the issue of eligibility. We did not want to be limited to 1 hour like we were at the last meeting. Now, somehow, there are now 10 or 11 witnesses allotted to that small period of time that was designated for witnesses at this meeting. I do not know how that happened when the task force specifically gave a directive that we only wanted a few witnesses and we wanted to make sure that we could get to the issue of eligibility to discuss as a task force by 11 o'clock. So I believe that when the task force as a collective gives a directive and votes on it at a meeting, that directive needs to be followed in whatever transaction takes place to put the agenda together. That did not happen at this meeting.
Thank I believe Dr. Brown, he has something to contribute to this actual point. I think that's really the reason why he wanted to be a part of this part of the discussion as well. I actually agree with you, Member Holder, completely. I was under the same understanding as well, and full transparency, we're letting it all out. So when we first got the first draft of the agenda, it included 6 genealogists, 3 recommended by myself, 1 recommended by Member Grills, and then 1 recommended by Member Holder. So everything was fine. And then so 6 was enough, right? Then there were 2 additions by Member Grills, Dr. Greg Carr and Jessica Ann Ayuwar. They're not genealogists, not sure what their expertise is in the conversation around eligibility, aside from them obviously having their own position around it. And so there was a conversation between Vice Chair Brown and myself where we wanted to exercise our authority as chair and vice chair, as you all elected us to do, to finalize the agenda, to take Dr. Greg Carr and Jessica Ann Ayuwar off the agenda so that it could be just those 6 people, right? Understanding that the directive was this particular hearing on eligibility, the panel should be no longer than an hour, right? Then we received word from the DOJ that the chair and the vice chair, we don't have the authority per se to confirm witnesses or to remove witnesses from the agenda after they're confirmed already by members of the task force. So then I posed a question to the DOJ, and I think this is what Damon is pointing to, where he's asking for people's opinions and thoughts. Let's say as a 9-member task force, we all reach out to 3 people, right? And they all confirm, each confirm, right? So that's like 27, 30 people who are confirmed. What do we then do? Do we hear 30 people for one panel, or does the chair and the vice chair have the authority to select amongst those 30 people who will be a part of the final agenda, right? It was under Vice Chair Brown, in my impression, that we do have that authority. But then the DOJ, namely Attorney Newman, Attorney Brown, and Parliamentarian Johnson, told us that we don't have that authority. And so that is how all of these names appeared on the list. So I hope that answers your question.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Vice Chair Brown, you're recognized.
First, good morning and good afternoon to everyone. I'm apologizing for not being able to be on the call. However, because of technical difficulties with Blue Jeans, and in my estimation, this task force not receiving the kind of quality and transparent engagement over the affairs of this task force. And let me say personally here, this whole enterprise should be about the people, the people's agenda, and no one's ideological, private position. I want to say that again. This task force should be about the people's agenda and no one's ideological, private, political position. And I'm appealing to every member of the task force to remember we are representing the legacy and the dignity of a people who were wronged in this nation. This is the scene of the crime. It's our house is on fire, and not everybody's house in the block. That's not to say we should not be concerned about others when their house is on the block, on fire. And I think it's time that we use facts logic, and common sense. Other thing that concerns me greatly is when it comes to engagement of people to be heard, it should actually mean the engagement of everybody. And from what I have witnessed, listening, not speaking, but listening, here recently there have been certain groups who, yes, they're entitled to their position, who have been positioned to becloud and compromise the process. And I feel it's our moral responsibility, the chair and vice chair, to give leadership, not to be dictatorial, not to refuse everybody being heard. We're about that. Over all the resource that I have and the love that I have for my people, I'm not going to be quiet in the face of what can prove to be our being set up for failure. Set up for failure. And what I hear happening, what has been kicked around about inclusivity, that's fine, that's great, that's good. But are we gonna act like we live in a country where there are no political realities, no laws? Are we just gonna go through an exercise and end up at the end of the day coming up with no measurable outcomes whatsoever? We must be looking for outcomes. I end with this, Madam Chair, and I thank you for giving me this personal privilege you said. There's an old story. Yes, it's a fable, but it has a truth in it. The story is told about Dr. Grasshopper and Mr. Centipede. Dr. Grasshopper was always giving advice about this and that, what ought to be done. But Mr. Centipede had a problem. With all of those legs, couldn't get around. So one day he went to consult Dr. Grasshopper and said, Dr. Grasshopper, my life has been difficult. For all of these legs, I don't have the mobility that I deserve. Said, what should I do? Dr. Grasshopper said, well, if you become a butterfly, you'll be able to just flop your wings and move from limb to limb and spot to spot. And you won't have a care in the world. Mr. Centipede said, that sounds great. That's good. But how do I become a butterfly? Dr. Grasshopper's retort was, oh, that's a practical, tactical issue. I only give advice and say what ought to be done. My friends, are we doing justice to this process? If we're only about what ought to be and are not positioning ourselves to be practical, social, political engineers who at the end of the day, will have more that we will have done of just giving presentations and analysis. As I said before, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., my late teachers, once said to a group of us during the movement days, my God, if you all don't stop talking and going around in circles, we're going to make this thing a paralysis of an analysis. And I plead with respect, with passion, that as I am not able to be with you today, I'm here in Washington, D.C. Why am I here? At the White House to witness Joe Biden signing that Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act that took this nation 104 years to come around to even through the U.S. Congress, saying black folks have value and we are more than 3/4 human. We are people, persons whose dignity should be regarded and respected. So, my friends, it shouldn't have happened. But if it took this nation 104 years to get around to respecting our worth and saying that it was wrong to lynch a black person, ought we not have common sense enough to see that it is our moral obligation as this task force to work to come up with a measure that will give us a practical steps toward doing something for people who've been enslaved in this country and built this economy of this nation when cotton was made king and all other things that we've done. That ought to be our task. That ought to be our challenge. And that ought to be our practical duty so that whatever we come up with, it will bring a better quality of life for our people. Yes, I know a whole lot about Pan-Africanism, Pat Moore, Marcus Garvey, and they were great men. And they had great vision for black people. But what we're dealing with in this instance is about what we're going to do to bring some healing to those folks who were wronged in this nation. I have the facts of where my grandfather was enslaved in Franklin County, Mississippi, 1821. The evidence is there. And it's disingenuous, in my estimation, for any of us to say you can't find the record. The record is on high. Since the U.S. census has been taken, and with all the technology that we have in this nation, and many of us as scholars, I think we are not looking far enough to say we cannot quantify what enslavement was in these United States of America for over 240 to 250 years almost. So thank you for hearing me. But again, remember, we got a task, we have a charge to keep, and we should not let the governor, the assembly, any of them have an excuse to say we can't do what ought to be done to be fair about black people who deserve reparations because of the law that says you can't do this and you can't do that. No, we got to be smart. That's what we got to do. And at the end of the day, be the winners.
Thank you, Vice Chair Brown. I just want to make a note of time that we're 15 minutes behind on the schedule, and I know that you're in Washington, D.C. right now, so you're on Eastern Standard Time. So this is just a friendly reminder that the task force will discuss the community of eligibility from 1:15 to 3:15 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So that's 4 o'clock, 4:15 Eastern Time to 6:15 Eastern Time. So just putting that on your purview.
Someone please text that to me because I'm in a spot where I'm not able to.
Yes, I will text it to you.
Thank you.
Hopefully the DOJ will also be in steady communication with you as well. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. In interest of time, I don't know, essentially to Damon's point, again, Member Holder, Vice Chair Brown and I share your concerns. We, received a particular directive from the task force in terms of the particular types of people we wanted to hear from. That was on the first agenda with those 6 genealogists then, the girls invited Jessica and Iowar and Greg Carr, who Vice Chair Brown and myself believe should not be a part of the agenda. But then the DOJ told us that we didn't have any authority to remove anyone from the agenda after they were already confirmed by task force members. So then that begs the question, and I think that get clarity from it, and we could talk later on about this in the interest of time. But again, it goes to the question. Let's say there's 30 people confirmed. Does the chair, the vice chair, have the authority to vet and confirm and finalize the witness list? The DOJ said that the task force did not give us that authority. So if that's the case, there needs to be a motion or something to clarify the scopes and powers of the chair and vice chair as bestowed upon by the rest of the task force members.
Madam Chair, if I could just respond and again to Member Holder's question. One thing I did want to clarify, when the agenda that we sent to you had 8 confirmed witnesses, 2 witnesses that you referenced, Gregory Carr and Jessica and Iowar, those were not witnesses that Member Groves had belatedly proposed to us. She had submitted those names within the time that we had requested witnesses to be provided to DOJ. They were included on the agenda after we had made contact with them and confirmed their availability and interest to be presented for consideration. So the 8 members that we submitted to you and Dr. Brown for review did contain those names. It was after the conversation that we had about the agenda that I believe 3 additional names were added, I believe by you, to the agenda, and that the time that was originally allotted was expanded to where it was. So to Member Holder's question as to how the agenda got to the point where we had 11 witnesses and an hour and a half time, that was a decision that was subsequently made by the chair and the vice chair. I think Chair Moore's point is accurate in the fact that we do feel that there is a need to clarify if for any other reason so that the individuals who are tasked and delegated certain authorities have a firm understanding of the scope of that authority. And again, more directed as it relates to DOJ, that we have firm direction on what our role should be in assisting you with the confirmation of witnesses to comport with any directive given as to the time frame in which you'd like to hear from witnesses. So I will defer back to Chair Moore in terms of whether this is something that we continue to have a discussion with now, or if there's another point in the agenda where a more robust discussion of this would be appropriate. And then I only have one other point to make, just logistically for the rest of the meeting today.
Thank you so much. You can proceed.
Okay. The other point I wanted to make was, as we move forward, there may be additional issues that we need to resolve between this meeting and the April meeting, as we continue to consult with the task force experts on their thoughts, including specifically as we develop the executive summary of the report. In order to facilitate this communication, we recommend that the task force consider designating 2 members as an advisory committee to work with us and the experts to receive and potentially incorporate edits, which would then be brought back to the full task force for its consideration and final approval at the next meeting when we anticipate that the full report will be voted on. I know that that the task force designated Chair Moore and Member Lewis as an advisory committee to work with the experts on setting up the framework for the scope of work. And certainly if it's your prerogative to designate them to continue to work with the panel of experts on some of these other issues, that would certainly be your choice, or to designate other individuals to do so. We just want to make sure that the expert panel is able to effectively communicate its thoughts back to the task force, and to do so under the restrictions that we're under. So that's another action item that I wanted to submit for your consideration.
This is Member Holder. I think these are important action items, but I really think that we need to stay on task right now and get to the witnesses and get to the discussion on eligibility. So I would ask that we table some of these important items to unfinished business for either today or tomorrow.
Very, very good. We can do that. The last point I'll just make, as everyone has observed, we've been having some challenges with Blue Jeans today. Our staff has been on with Blue Jeans all morning trying to troubleshoot some of these issues. And so one thing that we think we're going to try to do is to log off at the lunch break, if everyone can log off of Blue Jeans and then log back in at whatever time Chair Moore determines that we'll reconvene after the lunch break. So that we can try to reset some of the internal operations of the platform to hope to have a better service in the afternoon. So that concludes my updates. And as directed at the conclusion of today or at some point tomorrow, we can take up some of the additional items that I raised. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, sorry, I had some technical difficulties, but I'm back on. So yes, we will table the discussion on those points, namely also Jovan and I's advisory hearing update in terms of future hearing proposals will be moved to unfinished business, as well as this discussion about chair and vice chair authority around the agenda and the other points raised by Damon. We'll move it to unfinished business so that we can move along with the rest of the agenda. So
Madam Chair?
the next item, it's 11:50. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I would ask you to do it by consensus. You don't have to go through a formal motion, but you need to have the agreement of the body. So you can do it by consensus. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we were texting and you didn't say that, but okay, thank you. All right, so consensus. I guess we can just start with Don Tamaki.
That's fine. I think that's a real practical approach. Totally in agreement with it.
Okay, thank you. Member Grills, are you okay with that? Member Grills, are you okay with that? Okay. Member Scott Lewis?
Yes.
Okay. Member Holder?
Agreed.
Member Montgomery Stepp?
Yes, I'm fine with that.
Member Jones Sawyer? Member Bradford? Vice Chair Brown?
Yes.
Well, that is everyone. Okay, so we will move on. So now the agenda is lunch. All right, the short one, because the agenda is supposed to start at 11:45. The next panel is supposed to start at 11:45. Please excuse us for the technical difficulties and the time. Okay, also need to go back to the task force members. Should we start at 11:45 or should we delay? And 11:45 is in 5 minutes.
This is Member Grills. I think that we really need to be able to be informed for our discussion. So if task force members are able, I would suggest we move forward. And if we need to go get a snack or a bio break, we just put ourselves on mute and black out our camera and come back when we can.
Okay, thank you. Any opposition to that? Okay, hearing no opposition, actually agree. we can start promptly at 11:45. And so we have about 5 minutes as a break. Thank you.
And we should log on and log off, correct?
Yes, excuse me, this is Trini. I am going to have to stop the entire meeting. So this goes for the audience members as well. Yes, I have to stop the entire meeting so that Blue Jeans can clear their servers and get us back on track. So everyone in this meeting will have to log back on when the meeting reconvenes. And he says it'll only take about a minute to do. So we should have enough time in those 5 minutes that you've allotted.
Okay.
However, everyone will need to log back in. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to stop the meeting now, and you can log back in after I've stopped. He said it won't interfere with anything. Moderators, please do not log in until I tell you. Thank you.